Minister, there was an opinion poll over the last week or so showing a majority of people want the hated universal social charge to be abolished, something that was promised by Fine Gael in 2016, and indeed when it was imposed during the period of the economic crisis, it was supposed to be a temporary emergency austerity tax, very cruelly and unfairly imposed on working people, costing them thousands and thousands of euro every year. But despite the emergency being over, record budget surpluses, workers are still being hit with the USC. Will you listen to public opinion and abolish this hated charge for those at least earning under €100,000 to give working people a break?
Thank you very much, Deputy. The USC was designed and incorporated into the Irish taxation system in 2011 to replace the health and income levies. Its primary purpose was to widen the tax base and to provide a steady income to the Exchequer to provide funding for public services. The USC is an individualised tax, meaning that a person's liability to the tax is determined on the basis of a person's own individual income and personal circumstances. It is a more sustainable charge than those it replaced and is applied at a low rate on a wide base, which ensures that it is a stable and sustainable source of revenue for the state. It is important to point out that in 2016, the joint Department of Finance ESRI research found that USC represented a more stable form of revenue than income tax. The findings highlighted that USC revenues would fluctuate by less than income tax revenues whenever income is volatile, for example, where the economy moves from a boom to a bust. Given the openness of the Irish economy and consequent susceptibility to economic shocks, the contribution that the USC makes to the stability of the state's revenue sources is considerable. It's also important to note that the USC yield is around €5 billion, projected in fact to be €5.2 billion in the current year. If the USC were to be abolished, it would be necessary to generate this yield from alternative sources. Currently, individuals with income of less than €13,000 per annum are exempt. In addition, USC does not apply to social welfare payments such as the contributory and non-contributory state pensions, and in the current year it is estimated over 1.1 million taxpayer units, that's 35% of all taxpayer units, will be exempt from USC. We have one of the most progressive personal income tax systems in the world, which plays a crucial role in the process of income redistribution. Our redistributive tax system has been acknowledged by the IMF, the OECD and the ESRI, and it is my view that a broad-based progressive income tax system, where the majority of income earners make some contribution, but according to their means, is the most fair and sustainable income tax system in the long run.
Well, first of all, Minister, you're rewriting history in terms of the rationale of the universal social charge. It wasn't put forward at the time on the basis of broadening tax bases or anything like it. It was put forward as an emergency tax in response to a crisis created by banks and developers, and it was imposed on top of the income tax that workers pay, so that, for example, if you're earning €45,000 a year, on top of your income tax you pay €2,300. If you're earning €70,000, on top of your income tax you pay €4,300. And when you consider that because of the cost of living crisis, workers have lost €2,000, €3,000, €4,000, depending on their mortgage situation and so on. People are being hammered at the moment and they need a break. And you see, here's the irony and contradiction. While ordinary workers have lost out and lose out because of the USC, net household wealth in this country has dramatically increased. There is a group of people in this country who are winning from the current crisis, but it's always the PAYE worker who has to pick up the tab, or the ordinary worker. So why don't we pay for the abolition of the USC by imposing higher taxes on the very, very wealthy, as we have proposed? That would cover the cost of getting rid of what was an unfair austerity tax, supposed to be a temporary emergency tax.
Well, Deputy, first of all, I'm glad to hear that you do support reducing the burden of income tax on ordinary workers.
We've always
done that. We have brought forward such reductions in the last number of budgets. You've actually opposed it.
No, we haven't.
That is the fact. Well,
no, we haven't.
Did you ever vote for a finance bill?
We never voted for your budgets for other reasons.
Yeah, you never voted for a finance bill.
Not because of that.
That is the way in which we bring about reductions in the burden of income tax.
Because
you haven't said, by the way, in your question, what you're going to replace the €5 billion with. Now, the truth is that when you strip out what we deem to be and what I'm advised to be windfall receipts in the current year, we would have an underlying deficit in the current year. And yet you just put down a question, can we eliminate a tax that brings in €5 billion without setting out and explaining what you're going to replace it with? Now, you might argue you'll do that in your pre-budget submission, and of course I look forward to seeing it. We will honour the commitment we've made in the programme for government. We will be reducing the burden of income tax on all workers, low and middle income workers, all workers in the country in the budget, and on this occasion I hope you might actually support it.
Well, listen. First of all, there's the unseemly spectacle of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil scrambling over who's going to get the credit for the reduction in the USC. We've been very consistent in all of our budget submissions since the introduction of the USC in arguing it should be abolished. It was unfair, but it should be paid for. And you know this, Minister, because you've seen our budget submissions and you've seen the questions we put in recently, arguing do you pay for the abolition of the USC by having new bands of taxation on those on the higher incomes over 100,000 and having wealth taxes, as for example Oxfam are proposing, very similar to the one we've proposed every year. They estimate that a tiny tax on those who have more than 4 million in wealth could raise up to €8 billion a year, more than enough to pay for the abolition of the USC for those earning less than 100,000. Now, wouldn't that be fair? When there's some people are being crushed by the cost of living crisis, but there are other people whose wealth is clearly growing, and it's growing every single year. You can see it in the central bank quarterly reports on household wealth. It's heavily concentrated at the top of Irish society, people doing well, and workers are being hammered. Why don't we address that issue in a fair way?
But, Deputy, I think there's an obligation on you to be consistent, because when we bring forward budgets where we increase the tax credits, the POE tax credit, the personal tax credit for low-income workers, you stand up here and you vote against it and you oppose it. Now, we have a programme for government. Yes, you do. Well, check the voting record. You've never
voted against your finance bill. That's a different thing.
You've never voted for a package of income tax reductions in this House, and then you come in.
We've proposed them in our budget submission every year.
And you just propose we'll get rid of a tax that brings in €5 billion a year. We have a programme for government which is agreed by all three parties in the government to index credits and bans in line with.
That's in our budget submission as well.
And that's
was last year.
Was the programme for government commitment.
It's here.
That is what we have implemented in the past.
Costed as well. 850
and the commitment
million.
I can give is that we will be reducing the burden of income tax.
Index link the existing tax bands. That's our budget submission. Index link the existing tax bands.
And that will be done. And
in
I
our
look
budget
forward
submission.
to seeing your pre-budget submission.
That.
And hopefully you will support income tax reductions this year.
Should read the